You're listening to BFM 89.9, the business station.
Yes, Resource Center, good afternoon. This is Frida Liu, and we're going to Canada today. I have Roger F. Poulin, the president for the Malaysia-Canada Business Council here, and we'll be discussing business opportunities between both our countries as well as bilateral trade that's happening. But firstly, Roger, tell us a little bit about MCBC, what it does, when was it started?
Hey, good afternoon, Frida. Malaysia-Canada Business Council was formed back in 1989 with the help of the Canadian High Commission as well as the Ministry of International Trade from Malaysia. And it's been operating since then as a sole entity, if you will. It's not financially supported by Canada or Malaysia. So we support ourselves with our members and through activities that we do for our members.
Okay, and when you talk about members, how many members would there be?
There are approximately 75 companies, both Malaysian and Canadian. For the Malaysian side, it's either companies that are doing business with Canada or those who are interested in doing business with Canada.
And I guess also, when you talk about business in Canada, the trade that we do between both of us, what kind of volume are we talking about?
It's at this point in time, it's in favor of Malaysia, but
yes.
Approximately 10 billion ringgit of trade per year. And so approximately, I think it's 70% of that is in favor of Malaysia. So
okay.
About 7 billion.
And what are we sending over?
Well, you're investing in Canada in some respects. What you're sending over are end products such as the palm oil. As an investment, Malaysia Felda has actually invested over 700 million ringgit in a plant in Quebec to develop canola oil mixed with palm oil, and so they're actually bringing that back into Malaysia, which is what we sell to Malaysia. And then at the same time, Malaysia sells. I'm not quite sure what the largest portion is, but they're into oil and gas and into a variety of services, which essentially are beneficial to Canada.
With in the last, I guess, 20 plus years with the council set up as well, or just even the last 10 years, has the sort of trade changed? With the kind of things that we were doing together?
Yeah, I think so. It's Canada's. Like Talisman from Canada is an oil and gas giant in a sense, and they actually invested about 10 billion Canadian dollars in Malaysia over the next 5 to 6 years, and it's for the research and development of oil and gas between Vietnam and Malaysia with Petronas. And in the same breath, Petronas has also invested about 3 billion Canadian dollars in a shale development for oil and for gas development out of British Columbia. So that there's a lot of work going on between both countries. SNC Lavalin is also a very large investor in Malaysia for the development of the LRT system. Bombardier is on your 10 ringgit bill, as that's our Canadian contribution to your $10. So
the LRT.
The LRT system is on your $10 bill. So, but essentially that's a system that Canada has developed as a manless system, including companies like Bata Shoes, which is Canadian for most people who don't recognize that, which is the majority of people. They think it's Malaysian.
Yes.
But then if you're in China, they think it's Chinese. So.
But that was news for me when you said that was Canadian. And they've moved their headquarters, but it's largely a Canadian family.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know the origins is from Czechoslovakia, but they settled there for a long time. So with Malaysian companies, what have they largely been participating in?
On the Canadian side, they've been investing in Canada on property. Like I said, Petronas has invested $3 billion in the shale production. Yo's the soybean drink is all of the soybean comes from Canada, 100% of it, because he thinks it's the purest soybean in the world. He's done his research on that. K&M Group has invested in Tofield, Alberta for oil and gas. Like I say, Felda is invested in the canola portion. So Alcan built the dome for Shah Alam's Blue Mosque. Royal Selangor owns Seagull Pewter in Nova Scotia, which is Canada's largest pewter manufacturer. So there's some very good synergies between Canada and Malaysia, which most people probably don't know, because both Malaysia and Canada are kind of low-key when it comes to boasting. We don't boast very well about ourselves.
Unlike some. Okay, education, tourism, we'll touch a little bit on that in just a moment with Roger F. Poulin, the president for the Malaysia-Canada Business Council, right here in Resource Centre, BFM 89.9. It's Resource Centre. Good afternoon. This is Frida Liu. I'm here with Roger F. Poulin, the president for the Malaysia-Canada Business Council, and MCBC has been formed since 1989. But you were saying as well that Canadian companies have been here since the 1910.
Yes, I believe it was 1910. Yeah, because a Canadian firm, actually, Canadian engineers, discovered Malaysia's first oil deposits at Miri in Sarawak. At Canada Hill.
Oh, okay. So hence the name.
Yes.
Okay. Now the other thing as well, with the economy, that has happened in North America. Has it affected the trade between both countries?
I don't think it's affected the trade that much. Luckily, Malaysia had already positioned itself to diversify within the region, doing trade with China, India, and other countries. And so they weren't negatively affected as much as, let's say, the U.S. Or Europe. Canada, on the other side, have had a very strong financial banking system. Mm-hmm. Which was not negatively affected because the Canadian government stipulated certain rules and regulations on the banks, which prevented them from investing freely in certain areas. That they wanted to protect the banking system and the investments of or the deposits of investors to make sure that they were protected. And so actually Malaysia has adopted the same system for the guarantee of banks of 60,000 ringgit, I think it is. They actually hired the people that set it up in Canada. They brought them into Malaysia and set it up here in Malaysia also. Thus the guaranteed, deposits that the banks are now providing for Malaysians is the same as Canada.
Right.
So that in itself, because of that, the financials in Canada were relatively good. The banks were okay. They were affected, but certainly not as bad as shutting down. There were no banks shutting down in Canada. In fact, Canada is buying a lot of banks in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, what about in tourism? What's happening in that space?
In Canada tourism is for Malaysians is about 8,000 Malaysians visit Canada a year, whereas Canadians like to come to Malaysia. About 40,000 Canadians come every year, so it makes it a little more attractive. Probably the heat and So it's a good turnaround for Malaysians.
I think it's a lot more difficult to get into Canada because of the visa requirements, because that changed a little bit.
It changed a bit since 911, but at the same time, it's not a very stringent process. I mean, as long as you're not a criminal, you should be okay, which I don't think most Malaysians are. So we make it relatively easy for people to come in, especially on a business visa.
The other thing was education.
Yeah, well, education, there are over 70 to 80,000 Malaysians that have graduated from Canada since 1957. And actually there were programs that Canada had set up back in the 60s with CETA Inc., a Canadian International Development Agency, whereby they were sponsoring some of the education and helping out some of the education. But truth be known, now there's about 800 to 1,000 that travel to Canada for education every year. Mm-hmm. And the system is quite good. The cost of education is extremely competitive. In fact, it's touted as being even cheaper than studying in Australia. The distance is a little onerous for some people, but I mean, at the same time, if you don't get into an adventure, that's what education is about.
And there's also talk of a campus of a Canadian university starting in campus here. Yeah,
the University of Saskatchewan is going to be helping set up a Canadian program for universities, for their university, primarily in agriculture, I believe. But I mean, if you look at Taylor's College as well as Sunway University College, they also have programs which are based on Canadian curriculum, secondary, and then leading up into university.
Oh.
So it's not a university program, but it's a foundation for it.
Okay.
And then they prepare them to go to study in Canada, which is great.
It's sort of like a high school certificate.
High school certificate, Canadian high school certificate,
Okay.
and then after that they're ready to go into Canada directly for university.
And who are the investors from Canada into Malaysia?
Investors.
I know RIM is sort of setting up here.
Yeah, RIM has just set up a plant in Penang to manufacture their phone, and to be a distribution point for the region. So that's a great plus for Malaysia and for Canada in a sense. Also, we have Talisman, which is oil and gas industry, SNC Lavalin and Bombardier, who are the LRT light rail transit systems. Alcan, which was a Canadian company and now has been bought out, but before that, Alcan was in Malaysia. And who else?
How strategic is Malaysia in the ASEAN region for Canada?
Well, I think it's becoming fairly important and fairly obvious to the Canadian government that that Malaysia is important for the region. It's an entry point, and in my mind, I've always encouraged Malaysia as opposed to some of our neighbors down south, because of the cost, because of the competitiveness, because of the opportunities that are here. I mean, if a Canadian company sets up here, they can set up an HQ at a reasonable price, not be taxed for 10 years or a period of time. Depending on MIDA, we have a good relationship with MIDA and MITI, and the dialogue is quite good between Canada and Malaysia. We just had the Governor General visit, as well as the Minister of International Trade from Canada. He just visited actually your counterpart here. And so now if I'm not mistaken, the Minister of International Trade is going to Canada in April with a contingency of about 20 Malaysian companies.
All right. Now, with that, what are the opportunities, speaking of that contingency, what are the opportunities for SMEs in Canada?
There are almost any division or any sector within any industry.
Tourism, for one.
Tourism, for sure. Absolutely. There's the opportunities are quite vast because the Canadian government has a database of about 30,000 Canadian SMEs who are export ready, who are import ready, who are willing to import products or services to Canada, and vice versa. And so people who may be interested can either approach the Malaysia Canada Business Council or the Canadian High Commission and ask them. It has to be quite clear what it is your intent is. But as long as you have specifics and you have an interest in exporting your products, Canada is a great entry point into NAFTA, which is the U.S. as well as Mexico. So 330 million south and another 90 million in Mexico. So you have almost 500 million people that you could export to through Canada and NAFTA.
All right. Any final words around this, Roger?
Well, we hold an annual golf tournament every year, which is a great opportunity to network and to get sponsorship for that on our Canadian side, and that's part of our operation, as well as membership is open to Malaysians as well as Canadian companies. So,
incidentally, how many Canadians would there be in the country?
There are approximately 1,000. Approximately 1,000, so about 300 families, roughly.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. I was speaking to Roger F. Poulin, President for the Malaysia Canada Business Council in Resource Centre, BFM 89.9.
BFM 89.9, the business station.